you think all these surrogate measures of raising your fucking testosterone, sunbathing, tiptoeing through the fucking tulips, like that's conducive to a high testosterone lifestyle.
Welcome to Man vs. World. What episode are we on now, Pete?
We're on episode 20, which means we are 1/5 of the way there to having a real podcast. You know what I mean? Because it's like,
Yeah, you need 100.
Yeah, you need 100. Come on.
Right, exactly. Otherwise, people don't even take it seriously yet. Well, if you're tuning in for the first time, how would you summarize this podcast? I guess you could say it's like I'm trying to beat all of the NPC out of you so that you can become the full protagonist of your life.
Absolutely.
Okay, because I think we live in a world that it just wants to turn you into this soulless husk, this little mind-numbed zombie who just scrolls and clicks their way to oblivion, working some kind of bullshit job, not being happy, not being fulfilled. And guess what? We want to break you out of that. We want you to be the man that you are meant to be. And so on that note, what do we have here today, Pete?
Today, we're talking about how to get rid of depression once and for all, how to avoid one of the biggest rationalizations in the way of quitting porn, and how corporate America is turning into adult daycare. But before we get into all of that, here's a clip from Brute DeForce on Twitter talking about why you might have low T.
One of the dumbest takes that I've ever fucking heard is that the reason why men have low testosterone as a whole is because of environmental toxicity. Everyone's talking about big plastics, environmental estrogens. All that's fucking nonsense. Use some fucking common sense. We live in the most comfortable arcology of all time. There are no real fucking wars to fight. We haven't had a war on our soil. Motherfuckers that you cite from the past that had raging high T were under constant attack every fucking day. You live in fucking an air-conditioned environment. You won't even go for a jog if it's 105 and it's dry. And you're over here, your entire lifestyle is fucking low T. There's zero explosiveness in your lifestyle. And testosterone is an as-needed hormone. Why the fuck would your testosterone be high 24/7? That makes zero fucking sense. If you're sitting in a doctor's office under fucking fluorescent light, getting a needle stuck into you to do your bloods, why the fuck would your T be high? But if I launch you in the dead center of the fucking jungle, I guarantee you get a fucking T-spike. I don't care if you're built like Steve Urkel. But you motherfuckers, the hardest thing you've done in your life, the most painful experience you've had is almost scalding your nuts on your patio. Because you think all these surrogate measures of raising your fucking testosterone, sunbathing, tiptoeing through the fucking tulips, like that's conducive to a high testosterone lifestyle. Yeah, when's the last time you went all in on a fucking business venture? All in, with every fucking resource that you have, and how about in everybody else's resources that you know? Because you had that much conviction. What happens when you get blown to smithereens there? Guarantee you fall apart. What are you gonna do the next morning? Your testosterone is fucking deteriorated because your lifestyle is horrifically comfortable.
I love Brute. He's one of my favorite accounts on Twitter to follow. He gives these very raw takes, kind of slaps you out of stuff. Like, you know, it's very trendy today. You've probably seen the accounts like Carnivore Aurelius and Carnivore MD, and you know, all these guys. They're just like, oh, you gotta sun your taint. It's the seed oils that are stealing your testosterone. It's like all this kind of stuff. And, you know, maybe there's something to it. I don't know. Maybe all the plastics and shit in our food, it really is just destroying our T levels. Could be. Probably is not helping. Okay. But I also got to agree with Brute here. I mean, like, this is like, if you want to release testosterone, put yourself under stress, right? Put yourself in a state of conflict. Put yourself in a state of risk taking, right? These are like testosterone. It's not just a physical thing. It's something that's activated mentally, right? It's activated mentally. It's activated by the way that you present yourself, the way you hold yourself, the way you, go about your life, right? It's like if you engage in no conflict, why would your body produce the hormone that's designed to help you overcome conflict, right? It's the key that lets you engage in that fight mode, right? If you're under stress, you can either go into flight mode or you can go into fight mode. And if you want more tea, then you have to be putting yourself in a position that, one, triggers the stress reaction. So it's got to be some kind of like real, actual threat, some real risk, a business venture. Maybe it's just approaching a woman. Maybe it's, trying to learn something new that's outside your comfort zone. It could be cold showers even, all right? Like maybe it's lifting heavy, something. You got to push yourself out into the zone of discomfort, have that part of your brain that wants to run away, and instead of running away, you lean into it. You go forward. You actually focus on doing the thing, right? And so I agree. I think this is a really important thing to keep in mind. Because everyone's looking for their little hack. Everyone's looking for their little shortcut. Everybody wants the big muscles without going to the gym. It's like, oh, well, maybe if I just sun my nuts a little bit more, my biceps will get bigger without me having to break as much of a sweat. And I get that. Of course I understand that. Everybody wants the good things at the easiest rate. But what you find, at least what I've found, as I've lived my life more and more and more, is that the happiest that you're going to be is when you are living all out, when you are living with real stakes in your life, where there is actual risk, where you're really going and doing your best, right? And I'm not saying there's not seasons where you're going to want to chill out a little bit, but most of the people who I've really respected, they've always talked about those periods as traps, where they get fat, lazy, and then something bad happens to them. And they look back on it and they say, thank God, because it got my ass back in gear. And so, that's what I think we're made for as men. I think we're made to do hard things. We're made to be in situations where we are under fire, where we are under attack. And if you're not doing those things, it's like, well, what are you doing with your life? Are you just trying to coast through this thing? Or are you really trying to get to the end of it? Like that's like get to the heart of it, get to the meat of it. Really crack it open and suck out the marrow, right? That's what I want out of life. Like forget this idea of being, non-attached and free from desire. It's like, no, I want maximum desire. I want to be plugged in as intensely as I possibly can to this life. And it seems like the more that I do that, the more my body responds by giving me energy, power, and focus, right? Like back when I had an easy life, real easy life. I could just play video games all day. I could jerk off all day. Guess how long I could focus? For about an hour before it became way too hard and I needed a break. I can now literally focus from sun up to sundown. And I'm not saying that's good to do that. I do that sometimes, but it's just like, it doesn't necessarily feel good because I want to see my daughter and I want to see my wife and that sort of thing. But it's like, I can do it. And part of me likes it. Part of me really likes it because life becomes your game. Your neurochemicals hook into things, right? And it doesn't happen when there's no stakes. It doesn't happen when there's no challenge or threat. And so I agree with this guy. And I think that we need to be keeping that in mind next time we are obsessing over, our plastics or our, how much sun our genitals get or, whether you're following the perfect diet or whatever. It's like there's plenty of guys out there who have way higher teeth than you. They eat like shit. They spend barely any time in the sun, but they're snapping necks and cashing checks and like they're just being ballers, right? So it's like, take it all, right? Just don't get so caught up. Who is it? Dan John always talks about it. It's like, don't get caught majoring in the minors, right? If you want to be a man, focus on living like a man. You focusing on the plastics and the minutia of, optimizing your health, that's kind of pussy shit. It's like, I'm not saying it's horrible. There's a time and a place for it. Before you freak out in the comments, just know that it's secondary to you being on fire in your mission.
You should learn to floss before you learn to deadlift. That was one of my favorite interviews you did with Dan John. I love that one. Alrighty. So next up, Dr. Trish Lay of Porn Rewire recently released a video titled "Trying to Quit Porn, Don't Do This." Let's check it out.
Trying to quit porn but testing your fortitude by going back into the screen? Don't do it. It's a trick. I'm Dr. Trish Lee, and I'm here to tell you that that's the oldest trick in the book that the hijacker of porn addiction does to someone on the road to quitting porn and porn recovery. This is how it goes. You're doing great in your recovery and you're putting the pieces into place. You're getting on purpose in your work, in your relationships, and in your hobbies. You're unwiring that porn brain pattern that keeps pushing you back into the screen while you put up fences to keep the pull of the screen down. You're rewiring your brain so that it feels great and you're feeling good. You're getting more out of the exercise that you do. You feel more focused. You're making more money. You're cranking and you're on your way to hardwiring in that pattern forever. But then you have the thought, I have a brilliant idea. Let me just test my fortitude. Let me just see if porn still arouses me. I am here to tell you, don't do it, my friend. That's the hijacker, and he's trying to trick you.
So, yes, I agree with this, that, when you're in the rebooting phase and things like that, you absolutely want to make sure that you do not go back and check it out, right? And there'll be a point where you never, ever want to look at it again. But if I'm going to be completely real with you, you're probably going to look at something at some point because you're a man and because that's just the way we are, right? And the thing, though, that you want to be looking for if you do this, and I don't recommend, definitely not for the first 90 days, probably not for the first 6 months even. But at some point, you're going to want to just see it again, see, what does this do to me? And if you're really worried about it or something like that, you don't trust yourself, get an accountability guy, say, hey, I'm going to just look at this for a few minutes, see what happens. And if you're doing the real rewiring work, you're really focusing on your perspective of sexuality, improving it, focusing on learning how to tell the whole truth about something that you see, what will eventually happen is that you will be able to look at porn, and yes, there'll be a part of you that's attracted to the attractive bodies you see, but the voice that will become louder is the idea that this is disgusting. Because have you ever for example, seen someone on social media just behave disgustingly? They are clearly just so attention seeking, insecure, and just being so phony and fake and gross. It's you see that, it's ugh. It's just you almost can't even look at it. It's just a cringe in your body. Same kind of thing starts to happen with porn, because as you get wired away from it, assuming you are doing the reconditioning, assuming you are constantly telling yourself the truth about what porn is, the truth about what you want, etc., that voice will get stronger and stronger. So this is definitely not something that you want to test and see, oh, where am I at with this? Where am I going? Blah, blah, blah. But I also don't want to make it seem like if you ever look at porn again, you're guaranteed to relapse, because that's what guys kind of do. It's well, I saw it, so I had to jerk off to it. It's what? That's insane. Especially as you reclaim your sense of humanity. Right? If you start getting longer and longer streaks without porn in your life, you're going to be becoming more and more yourself. And the reflex is going to break. It's imagine this. It's imagine you see a pretty woman walk by you on the street and then you just I guess I got to jerk off while she walks by me. It's no, that's they will lock people up for doing that kind of stuff. So it's if you can have that kind of control on the street, why the hell do you need to jerk off if you see, porn? You don't. Okay. And so your capacity to do that will increase as you go through time. Yes, I agree with her. You do not want to test this stuff at all, especially during the rebooting process. And it's not something you really want to seek out either, because it sticks in your brain, right? You get memories of it. You think about it. It'll follow you around. And so, but the thing is, I know guys, I know they will peek at it at some point. And what you have to keep in mind is that, all right, there's going to be a voice here that's disgusted. That's the voice that I want to listen to. And if you need to just expose yourself to it, to hear it, fine. Again, I don't recommend this. If you can go your whole life without doing this, that would be better. But if you are going to do it, don't do it with this mentality of, oh, I'm just gonna check it out and, we'll see what happens and blah, blah. It's just like, no, you have to go in with a firm conviction, okay? Because at the end of the day, it's like, I don't want guys to be afraid of porn. And that's what I think a lot of recovery systems do, is they have guys be afraid of it. It's like, oh, you got to put this super intense porn blocker up. You got to, be worried that if you see it, you're going to relapse. And while the reflex is still there, yeah, I get that. But still, you got to become stronger than that. The way I always relate it to is like, if you want to be safe, like carrying a gun, learn how to carry a gun with a round in the chamber, because that means that you're engaging with it with ultimate respect. Okay. It's like, what it is. It's right here. It's like a single little movement on the trigger makes a bullet go off, creates a very dangerous scenario, but it's also one that has a lot of power and is a lot of importance given, where you live, how you live, etc. Same kind of thing with porn is like, when you understand what it is and you can still interact with it, that's when you've mastered it. And once you've once you get to that point, you never need to interact with it again, because you realize what it is. You have mastery over it, and you don't need to be afraid of it anymore. You don't need to like keeping it in like this boogeyman in the back of your mind of like, oh, it's just like, it's something that you should be avoiding because it's bad, because it sucks, because it makes you feel like shit, because it makes you not like yourself. It makes you not like how you behave. It makes you not like how you feel, right? And that's it. If there's ever a reason to avoid that little kind of peaking that I'm talking about, it's really that. It's like, why would you want to even like put yourself in a situation where you let women like this generate sexual arousal in you? Because it is gross. But at the same time, I know people are going to click on things, and just keep this in mind. Just because you see it, don't jerk off to it, all right? Just leave it alone. Let it be, and I'm not giving anyone permission to do this, so if you relapse, it's on you.
Okay, I'm going to keep this really short, I promise, but quick story time. So my folks bought a new place out in the South, and they have this giant metal shed, right? So I'm in there, and there's tons of garbage in this thing. Tons of garbage. So I'm spending like all day just like pulling trash out of this thing. And there's this giant loft, and on the loft there's tons of dirt and a bunch of crap, and there's just these two giant boxes. One box has got like this like knitting magazine thing, and then this other box, it's got a bunch of hot rod mags, just like car magazines. And I'm looking at that box and I'm going, yeah, I think I already know what's in that box. So what I do is I don't want to carry stuff all the way down this stairs. So what I do is I get a trash can underneath the loft, and I start pushing trash off of the loft. And I get to the boxes, and I've been kind of avoiding them because I'm like, this is I already know what this is. So I'm pushing these boxes off into the trash, right? And the little box with the knitting magazines, nail it, swish, baby. 3-pointer, didn't even hit the rim. Just like dropped it in perfectly. I get to the big box and I'm like shoving it with the shovel. Keep in mind too, it is so gross. I know there's like mice living in there. I don't want to touch it. It's just, it's gross up there. So anyway, I'm shoveling this box, and really in hindsight, I should have just picked it up. I'm shoveling this box and I push it off the edge, and it falls, and all the magazines just go all over the floor. And I go down, and sure enough, the hot rod mags were like meticulously placed on top of the box to cover what was underneath, which I thought was hilarious. And everything else was just like, just, Playboy, all this crap. So even if you don't search for it, like some crap's going to happen.
And so did you
like,
spend the rest of the day jerking off in the barn?
No, I swiftly got rid of it as quickly as I possibly could. To be honest, I was probably a little afraid of it. And it's interesting that you say you shouldn't be afraid of it. And I think that's true. You shouldn't, you shouldn't let fear entangle you like that. But yeah, you're going to run into it. So it's good to have fortitude, but I can absolutely see what Dr. Trish here is talking about, because, it's a lie. If you're in the rebooting process and it's like, let me go look. Yeah, no, don't do that. That's stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next up, I wanted to talk about this clip from Bulldog Mindset. where he's talking about how to get rid of depression once and for all. Let's check it out.
Depression in life is unavoidable, guys. I want to share with you today some of the things that I've done in my life to get over depression and to get my motivation back. The first thing that you need to understand in life is that when you are on a high, the next thing that is coming is a low, and when you're on a low, the next thing that's coming is a high. Now, the reason why I think this is really important is because if things are going good for you right now, you need to keep in perspective that someday you're going to wake up and be depressed and not have motivation. It's not possible for you just to keep on going on an upward trajectory. Everything in life is cyclic. We live on these cycles. All our hormones work on cycle. Our sleep works on a cycle. So many things in our life works in a cycle, and so does our mood.
I guess, like, I agree with what he's saying, sort of, in theory, but I also refuse to accept it, and we'll have to see what happens. But basically, it's like, I don't believe that you can't keep going on a high level. Like, that's my mindset choice, is that, like, I've always believed in that, even if I've not always been able to achieve it. That I believe that if you continuously set goals for yourself, if you continuously look for the next thing that's motivating to you, then you will always be able to continue forward, as long as you don't fall into vice and escapism. I think it's really, it's vice. It's, you know, in the spiritual sense, it's sin. When you start lying to yourself, yes, you will get screwed up. And I do think it's possible that, like, as you grow, there will be, you know, you will be exposed to your own levels of, you know, like new layers of deception inside of yourself that you weren't aware of. So I think that if there's any inevitable part of it, it's that, okay, you're going to break through a level, and then you're going to run into a background self-deception or limiting belief that's going to trip you up for a little while, and then, you know, you're gonna break through that and it's keep happening. But that's not the same thing as, like, you have to come back down because you were up. It's like, no, it's like, all right, just as you expand and evolve, you're going to start hitting your walls until you break through them. And I think that if you just keep going like this, eventually you're going to stop running into those kinds of walls on some level. Not to, like, it's like, I believe that it is possible to master yourself fully. I believe it's possible to reach spiritual perfection. I mean, like, you know, I'm a Christian. Jesus literally tells us to be perfect like he is perfect. He wouldn't tell us to do it if it wasn't possible. I believe it's possible. I believe that that's what you should be aiming for with every single ounce of your strength, every single fiber of your being. And if you reach that state, you shouldn't be going through cycles anymore. Yeah, things may move in cycles around you. You know, there might be curves and parabolas orbiting you, but you're not the thing that's orbiting anymore. You're not the thing going through the motion. You have set your heart, you have set your mind, you have set your spirit firmly on your path, and that path is leading upward. I believe that's the way it's possible to live that way. And we'll see. You know, this might be one of those things where I just choose to embrace it like that. I choose to see things like that. But I can tell you, I've had very tough times in my life, but I would never say I was depressed, ever. Not a single day. I've had days where I was sad. I've had days where I've been unmotivated, even periods, but I've never considered myself depressed. It's like whenever I was in one of those states, it was always my fault, and I could easily tell you exactly why I was feeling that way. And so, is it possible that I'm just blessed and lucky? Yep, it's very possible. I just have a weird quirk to my biology, and that's why I don't get depressed. Or it's just because I'm a relentless psychopath, and I think you should be too.
I love that, yeah. I mean, if you're going to choose something, you know, if you're going to choose an outlook on life, I don't know, I guess it's you're protecting yourself from disappointment. So you're like, you know, the fear is, oh, if I anticipate my life to be really happy all the time, when things are not happy all the time, hope deferred makes the heart sick. But I mean, if you're not shooting at anything,
it's not about being happy. That's the thing. Is like, that's happiness. Like, what even feeling is that? Like, are you talking about like, oh, I'm like right on the edge of chuckling? It's like, what are you talking like take engagement? Are you engaged, are you doing something meaningful? Right. That doesn't always feel good, but you're going to have peace in your soul. You're going to be excited to get up. You're going to have no resistance really to working. You're going to be doing something that matters to you, okay? Like, the thing that makes you unhappy is when, like, none of your neurochemicals are lined up in the direction that you want them to go, right? Or, you know, you're actually physically suffering, okay? So sickness, yeah, I can see how sickness knocks people down. Absolutely. I can see how the death of loved ones around you can knock you down and stuff like that. But, like, you know, in terms of general happiness and health, I think that's something that if you've got that, then, you know, fire away, you know, full steam.
Right on. All right, this next one is from a recent TED Talk called 5 Strategies for Raising Kids with Entrepreneurial Mindsets. Point number 3 stood out to me in particular. Here it is.
All right, let's see.
The next is to reduce their prosperity. Now, let's admit it, kids today have a lot of stuff, right? And when you think about it, I understand this need and this desire as parents to want to give our kids experiences and things that maybe we did not have when we were children. But when we choose a parenting style of overindulging our children by providing them with too much, too soon, for too long, with no effort on their part, what we do is actually raise young people who are self-centered and entitled.
Interesting. Well, in my experience, young people are naturally self-centered and entitled, regardless of how you raise them. I mean, I don't know. Unless I screwed something up like real early with my daughter, she is absolutely self-centered. But I think that's just the way 3-year-olds are.
I think that's the way people are, generally speaking. Yeah, I think you're right. Yes.
And I don't even think that's necessarily wrong. It's just like, okay, what do you do with them then? Yes, you definitely don't want to spoil your kids too much. You don't want them to be entitled, right? You want them to realize, hey, it's like, no, you say please. You don't demand the treat, right? But, like, I think one of I have to see how that plays out. You know, as my daughter gets older, it's one of those things it's difficult for me to assume exactly how it's going to go before I have the opportunity to really go through it. You know, with my daughter now, it's like the big thing I try to focus on is always make sure she has options. So it's like I never tell her to do something. Well, I mean, I'll tell her to do something, but if she like pushes back, I'll be like, okay, well, it's like you can, you know, finish your dinner or you can go to bed right now. And it's like she doesn't want to go to bed yet. So it's like you can pick. You just can't, you know, eat lollipops and watch TV right now. It's like you always focus on trying to give options. And I think if you do that, I think that's a good thing. That's one of the best things I found. And what it seems to have produced is at least a daughter who is shameless and tremendously skilled at negotiation. Now that her numbers are getting better, it's very hard to negotiate with her. Whenever she's got to go to bed, it's like it's a negotiation of how many hours she has to sleep. Whenever it's time to eat dinner, it's a negotiation of how many bites to eat, how many treats, and I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's definitely, to me, strikes me as an entrepreneurially minded kid. So we'll see.
Wow, that's funny, man. I can't wait to have kids of my own and daughters. It feels like it's just new levels on life, you know? That's what it seems like. Yeah.
It's the best. It's like, you know, it's hard and stuff like that. But like, as long as it's hard to the extent to which you're not all in on it. That's what I'll say about like raising kids. If you're not all in on being a parent and raising the kid, then it's going to constantly just feel like a sacrifice where it's like, oh, I don't get to do this thing that I want to do because of this stupid kid. And that I think is what a lot of people suffer with, you know, and I get it. You know, it's easy to have all these attachments and stuff before you have the kid, but, you know, if you're all in on it and like you realize being a parent is one of your core vocations and you optimize your life around that, well, it seems to take out a lot of the sting.
Yeah. Alrighty, it's recently been brought to my attention that corporate America is a little bit of adult daycare now. I don't want to rag on this lady. In fact, I want to thank her for showing us what it's like and giving us a little sneak peek. So I don't want to rag on her too much, but
today was one of those days where you leave for work at
there you go.
7 a.m. and you don't get back until past midnight. I left for work early for a 9 a.m. meeting that was conveniently canceled right beforehand. But luckily I got to the lobby and there were these eucalyptus towels waiting for me, which is really nice, and some fresh orange water, which I of course took before taking the elevator up to the office.
Does it ever say what company she works for?
She works for LinkedIn.
Oh.
I grabbed some breakfast, normal oatmeal and chia seed pudding, and we finally got LinkedIn mugs in the office, which I'm so excited about. Then I found out that the wall art that we have in the office is made out of recycled trees from Chicago, which was so cool, fun fact. And then it was time for our company all hands, so I grabbed our drink of the day, which is a blackberry mojito, and headed
How many like fancy drinks does she have a day? This is insane.
downstairs to the all hands room with some of my coworkers. Some lunch because we were starving after that. There was this cool little dish, and I grabbed a chai latte before heading to work. Watched some of my coworkers play ping pong, and then tried out our new quiet room, which is a really nice area to just like relax and unplug from work. Then it was time to buckle down. Like sat in our focus area for a while. I grabbed a
Wait, so like what time of the day do we think it is where she's finally buckled down to like get some work done?
I don't think she does. I think this is work. I think she goes around and eats food and drinks stuff.
snack after I was hungry. And then I finished up the rest of my work before getting an email announcing the next team that I'll be joining through my BLP program. Work was finally over. It was hot as hell, so we went to go get some drinks in Lincoln
get the
Park
idea, I think.
before heading to a housewarming party for one
But
of
then
our
like, what is it? She
It was
just
just
like
great summer
parties and
vibes
shit.
and really fun to
Yeah.
Just like, okay, yeah, just like scrat. I'm gonna go.
At this point, I realized
Yeah.
that I was still
Okay.
out with my work laptop, so I decided to call it a night.
Okay, yeah, that's Hey, you know what? If I could live that life, I'd probably live that life. You know, it's like sign up. It's like, do you want to do the adult daycare life? Yep, sure, of course. You know, as long as that's an option. Why not? You know, I understand why.
No, that sounds terrible.
I'm talking about like my 21, 22-year-old self. I would love that. You kidding me? It'd be so fun. It'd be so fun because you're coming from college, which is like the adult nursery. It's like the adult nursery where everyone's just like throwing up and shitting everywhere and just like has no idea what their genitals are, or what they do, and they're just like, you know, smashing into each other. That's college. And then this is like the preschool where it's like slightly more ordered. They know how to like eat their snacks properly, and you know, that's what it is. And so it's like it's a natural progression. But the things, I just don't know if that kind of shit is sustainable, right? Like how much value are they really providing? Like maybe it is a lot. Like I don't understand it. Like clearly LinkedIn is successful, right? But you were saying something about this before the show. What was it?
Okay, so, well, the thing is, so this is an intern. She's 22, out of, you know, some fancy smancy college, you know.
Oh,
And
she's an intern, so she's not even a real employee.
she's an intern who gets paid. I think she got paid like 70 grand a year or something.
Okay.
So she's getting paid a lot to do. I can't figure out what she does. I think she says
Probably
somewhere,
something like ridiculous, like where it's like tweaking like the fonts on like the sales page or something. Like usually what ends up happening on like these massive companies like this is that your task becomes so hyper specialized that it's like absurdly mind-numbingly boring. It's like on Netflix, it's like your job is to tweak the algorithm under the horror genre for people who have Spanish as their main language.
Right.
And it's like that's what you do every day, all day long. And it's something like, you know, because the company is so big, the software is so complex that like each person can only take ownership over the tiniest little thing unless you're like some super hot shot project manager.
okay.
And so in some ways, if that's the way it is, it's like, all right, our company, if our business is going to get better, we have to have this ultra specialized optimization, and we need super smart people to do it, but it's super fucking boring. And so we're going to just fill them with all these perks and do all this kind of stuff. That's what to the best of my understanding, that's how Google works. It's like most of the engineers who work there, they're incredibly smart, doing incredibly boring things. But those little minute improvements, those are the only things really that Google can do to increase its bottom line.
That makes a lot of sense, and I don't have a lot of experience with this kind of job, so I don't know what it, you know. So I'd take your word for it. But the job that I have had that was the most similar to this, even though it wasn't, it was filling up your day with stuff that was pretend work. You know what I mean? And so you had like a boss who was over you, and you're doing all this stuff, but you had to like pretend work. So if I worked at LinkedIn, all I would be doing if I was her is doing exactly what she's doing. I would just circle, like get some chai latte, go get a blueberry smoothie, and then come back around and then chill out in the restroom. They have a room to take a break in when you're not. It's not like a lunch room. It's just a room where you go take a break. I don't understand. So anyway, I would just be circling those, you know. So I like I said, I don't blame her, but I think it's crazy. You know, have you heard of Price's Law?
No.
So Price's Law says that it's similar to 80-20, but it's not quite as extreme, where it says the square root of the number of people working at an institution account for 50% of the work.
Okay.
So if you think about that,
it's like the same. Okay, so it's like this. It is the same thing as like the 80-20 almost, where it's like 80% of the work gets done by like 20% of the people. But in a lot of these tech companies, it might even be less than that. It might be like 10-90 or 95-5 or something like that.
It might. But even as cushy as that job is, and even as it's boring, and I'm not going to college for that. I'm sorry. I'd rather be pursuing things that are more meaningful than blueberry smoothies.
Hey, I get it. If you got to feed a family or whatever, and you need a good, reliable income, you get into the tech industry, go for it. But like, it's just that whole culture has become very disconnected from reality, but extremely vocal about the way the world should run. Then when they realize like, okay, your company, the world would go work just fine without it. But then you have extremely strong opinions about people who do actual work, like, people who drive trucks, people who, maintain our power lines and all that kind of stuff. Well, the world can't go on really without them, not without massive, horrible changes. If LinkedIn disappears, no one's going to cry too hard.
Yeah, you're right. Alrighty, so School of Life tweeted this out, and I wanted your take on it. So they said, it isn't logical that being happy should be any easier than learning the violin or require any less effort. So this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the show, but I wanted your take on this specifically.
Let me see. Okay. So this isn't logical that being happy should be any easier than learning the violin or require any less effort. I think that's the thing is like, I don't really want to be like, what is happy? What is happy? So if you're like someone who's like familiar with like, neurochemistry, are you a little bit? I mean, you've got at least picked it up passively.
No, not really. I know, okay. I know as much as you've basically explained through your Twitter account. That's pretty much my understanding.
Speaking of which, go follow me on Twitter, Mark Queppet. So it's like you've got the big ones, which are like oxytocin. Okay, that's like what makes you feel like loved and connected. You've got dopamine. That's what makes you feel like interested, anticipatory. There is a pleasure to it. It isn't what we would necessarily define as happy. It's like if you read an interesting headline, you're like, ooh, I want to read that article. Would you define that feeling as happy? I don't think I would necessarily. It's like there's a stimulation there, right? The closest thing I think we have to like maybe happiness might be the serotonin sort of feeling. And that's the feeling of like well-being, where it's like, I'm okay where I am. It's like nothing's burning down. My status is okay. Pretty much that's what determines your serotonin levels, is your perception of your status. Do you feel like you are in a good enough spot? And that's relative and it can fluctuate and everything like that. But that still isn't exactly happiness. Okay. And it's like, all right, well, what if we're going to talk about, laughing with friends? Okay, yeah, that's how I think most people think of it. Is like, they think about their life as like an Instagram post where someone's just constantly like, and it's just like, that can't be all day, right? And so I think what we have to probably fix more than anything is like, what is the real goal? Well, the things that we can have, like we can be hooked on progress in our life, the growth of something, whether it's, you very interested in the growth of your children, the growth of your career, your growth in the gym, whatever, forward progression in some form or another. You're going to find pleasure in that. You can secure yourself meaningful status in your family, in your community, in your career. Okay. That's going to make your neurochemicals feel good. Okay. You can have connections with other people. You can have, good, marriage, good relationship with your kids, your brothers, your sisters, your people, your whoever else you want to be friends with. That, to me, the fun you have there, that's pretty happy, right? That's the closest thing I would define as like, the average, like what I perceive the average person thinks of is happy. It's like connection. But you can't be just connecting with people all day, all the time, right? And so what's left in that time where you're not actively connecting with other people and you're not actively making progress on a goal? What is left there? Okay. It's like, I think what can fill that gap is two things: peace and joy. Okay. And those can happen even in the face of suffering. And that's what takes the real work. That's what I think this tweet is accurate about. It's like, all right, when we're not making progress on something, or we're not engaging in, fun connection with other people, there is a place where we can, through just spiritual growth, spiritual devotion, mindset work, all this kind of stuff, we can learn how to tap into a sublime peace that can lead ultimately into a state of joy, even if things are not going well. And yes, that does take a lot of work. That's like the, that's like the diamond of personal development that requires a tremendous amount of pressure, on the coal of your soul to form. But that's my take on it.
Joy would be a better word. I think happiness is too correlated with pleasure, just temporary. Oh, let's go have a good time, So being happy, what does that mean? Like you said, I think joy would be a better term to use. I think you're right on that. In terms of being happy, I do like Dennis Prager's take on this. He says, it is socially unacceptable to go out and be around people with bad breath. And if you do that if you go out and be around people with a sorrowful disposition, I don't know what the right word would be really, but if you go around and you're just pouting and you're not in a good
blanket.
mood. If you're a wet blanket, that's like having bad breath, and you have responsibility to the people around you to not at least act that way. At least fake it. Not for yourself, but for the people around you. Happy people make the world a better place, and the unhappy make it worse. I think there's a lot of truth in that. So I like his kind of take on that.
There is truth in that, but I think people who are actually struggling with like depression and stuff like that just adds to their guilt. They just
This is talking about being a wet blanket, like you said. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's definitely people who they relish being the wettest of blankets, like a full piss-soaked, rug. That's their MO in life, and then they got to go on Twitter and just tell the whole world, look at me, I'm just drenched in piss. I am such a wet, stinky blanket.
I have had buddies like that, and it's hard not to be pissed off at them for it. But it's like, that there's something going on there, but it's like, come on, dude. Like, what are you doing? But anyway, sorry, I'm getting too judgmental here. So moving on to the next one here. I've seen this post multiple times in our community, so I wanted to bring it up, and I didn't ask permission to talk about this from the guy who posted it, so we're going to leave him anonymous, but he said, my relationship of almost 5 years is at a crossroads at the moment, and I basically have to decide whether I should stay and try to work things out or leave the relationship. The main problem is that I find myself seriously questioning the relationship from time to time, mainly due to a lack of desire/attraction towards my partner. And then he goes on to say, however, everything else is great. She's compassionate, diligent, pretty, has a great sense of humor, and I care a lot about her. So what do you make of this, Mark?
Well, it seems like if you read forward, it's like, I think part of the lack of attraction comes from her being a bit bigger than what make me genuinely desire her on a more consistent basis.
Yes.
So basically saying like my girlfriend's a little fatter than I like. Everything about her is awesome. She's just a little bit thicker than I like. That's what he's saying, right? So
yeah, seems to be.
There's a couple of things to this. Okay. First, where are you at with quitting porn? Because porn is going to warp your mindset significantly. If you're using porn, you're looking at it, you're checking out Instagram thoughties and stuff like that, then that's going to be what your brain compares things to, right? So you're going to just be looking at her and you're like, you're not that girl who I jerked off to earlier. And your brain's going to be dissatisfied about that. And what's interesting about the brain, particularly what it finds sexually attractive, is that it's very malleable. We like to think that, someone is just objectively attractive. Not necessarily. There is a lot of variability in this. I mean, like, you just go and you look at like classical art, like the bodies on the women that were considered most beautiful would be like sub-average today. Okay. It's like, but those to them, that was just like, it's like, and to us, it's just like, yeah. So it's like, what happened? It's like, It's not that they had, like, the men back then didn't have different biology. It's just that that's what they were conditioned to. That's like what they liked. And what's interesting about this too is that, I know some women, they're very insecure about getting older, in a marriage, they're worried about like becoming less attractive and stuff like that. And if you have a guy who doesn't use porn, he doesn't jerk off and stuff, what I believe happens is that the man actually adapts his sexuality to his wife to the point where it's like he is always training his mind and his body to be aroused specifically by his wife. And yes, there is this whole Coolidge effect of how sexual novelty creates this spike of excitement. But if you pretty much ignore that, right? You take that off the table, you never indulge it. There's a secondary kind of effect that happens where it's like you train your brain to be aroused by your wife's body, your partner's body. And regardless of how that body ages and, changes, you can always be attracted to her. And this is stuff that I've, confirmed by talking to older couples who have had, they've been married, many decades, and how they maintain that romantic spark. So it's definitely possible to do this. But like, if you're incorporating any sort of porn and things like that in there, it's gonna mess things up a bunch. Now, the second piece of this is like, what kind of shape are you in, bro? Like, how like, fit are you? Okay, like if you were gonna rank her scale of 1 to 10, what would you give her? If you were gonna rank yourself scale of 1 to 10, what would you give yourself? Okay, and you don't want to, like, you can do just the raw appearance level of things, but then try it on the other level. So like, what about all the non-physical attributes? It sounds like if you're going to rank her 1 to 10 on the non-physical attributes, you'd rank her pretty high. In fact, I'm pretty sure, what does he say? We even have great sex occasionally, but there's usually a long time between. I don't find myself yearning for her in the meantime. So it's like, you even have sexual chemistry, dude. So it's like, I mean, I don't know. Like, say you're completely off porn and this is the issue, then I think, we got to maybe look at your mindset around it, potentially. Or you just got to get her in better shape. And so you can have a talk with her about it. You can, approach it together. It's like, are you going to get in shape? Are you going to lose weight? Are you going to inspire her? Like, there's a way to go about leading women that is inspirational and not like, this kind of like, lose weight or I'm dumping you, fatty. Like, although that may work.
I think I
don't
just
know.
had a 200 IQ level idea. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's my idea. Let me get your take on this. Ready?
Okay.
This is what you do. I'm going to assume that you're diced, talking to the guy who wrote this post. Okay. Let's just assume that he's absolutely peeled out of his mind. Giant jacked dude. Okay. Let yourself go intentionally for 2 years. Get a little chubby. Okay. Let yourself go a little bit and then say, hey, babe, I've been noticing that I'm not quite as, fit as I want it to be, but I'm having trouble getting to the gym. Would you go with me? Is that too manipulating? What do you think? I don't know.
I just think that, like, you can be, I mean, like, yes, like, my assumption is that this guy is not jacked out of his mind. Okay. That's my assumption. And so if that's the case, then you commit yourself to getting into the best shape of your life and you invite her along with you.
Yeah, man.
That's I think the way to do it.
That's awesome. Alrighty, so let's close out this show with a tweet here that you sent out, because I want you to dive into this a little bit more. So, the only thing as bad as society, you say, which has abandoned the idea of God, is the society which has also abandoned the idea of Satan. When evil no longer exists, quote unquote, expect it to flourish.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one to me, because I was someone who was very much enraptured with the idea of moral relativism for a long time. And that's the idea, if you guys don't know, it's that, well, there's nothing really like objectively good or bad. That's just like your opinion, bro. And I wholeheartedly agreed with that for a long time. And still, it's kind of technically true. Okay. It's like at a certain point, though, if you do not define good and bad, then you are not going to be able to create any sort of order in your life. Because how would you decide to do one thing over another thing? You can't. Because it's like, well, you have to say this thing's better than that thing. It's like, well, you can't do that if you're in this constantly like morally relativistic mindset. And so what ends up ultimately happening to people, and what ends up happening to me, is that you fall into nihilism. You fall into nihilism where nothing matters, everything's stupid, and then you just fall into kind of this emptiness and just usually engage in some form of self-obliteration through addiction or escape or drug, sex, whatever. And so at some point in yourself, you're going to have to decide, okay, well, for me, this is good, and for me, this is bad, right? But the problem is it can't just stop at you, right? Because that's what these moral relativists want to do. They say, well, I can decide what's good for me, and that person can decide what's good for them. But the problem is we are connected people. We are connected people. Like we are connected animals. Like that's what we're designed to do. We need a society in order to function. And we saw recently with COVID just how connected we are, and how like when things get divided, when someone disagrees with you about fundamental things, how much it can impact you. Like someone says, well, I'm going to be this scared, so you can't have your job. And it's like, well, shit. Why do they get to decide it? It's like, I wanted to decide what happens to me. I don't want them to decide what happens to me. And then you realize, shoot, I got to actually team up with people, and we have to have shared values. Well, how are we going to have shared values? Well, we have to decide what is our good, what is our bad. And so what I'm really talking about here with this tweet is the idea that like you live in a culture where there is no consensus around what is good and what is bad, because that is just a culture of chaos. And that's what I see us moving toward is a culture of chaos where, one side wants no boundaries. Pretty much the only boundary they have is you can't disagree with us. And the other side, they want more traditional values. And, traditional as in, meaning like I believe there is a difference between men and women, that a woman is an actual thing that I can define. Okay. It's like, that's
just radical.
Right. And so it's like, at some point you got to decide what kind of life you want to live, what's going to matter to you. And in order for you to pursue it, you're going to need other people in on the game with you. And as you do that, well, guess what? You end up with a good and a bad, a heaven and a hell, a God and a Satan. And you have to watch out for that, because as soon as like you fall into that relative moralism where you are constantly mincing words, refusing to reject something, then you live like a limp noodle, like someone who just kind of like wiggles around. Okay. It's like, I get the ideas. You don't want to condemn anyone. Okay. What I'm saying, like deciding good and bad, like it's never about saying this person is evil or that person is good. You say it's this way of living is good. This way of living is bad. Okay, and you can make value judgments about behaviors, about things, about scenarios. Of course, you don't want to judge another person's soul. You don't know exactly what brought them to that situation. Maybe it's ignorance, maybe it's pain, maybe it's trauma. Who knows? Not worth getting into that. But at the same time, you have to be willing to put your foot down on actions, saying, no, that's evil. That's horribly evil. Like, I don't want any part of that. And if you can't do that, then basically what you're saying is Satan doesn't exist. There's nothing really that bad. And at that point, it's a tacit permission to allow things to go, just however they go. I'm gonna just ride the wave, and that wave is almost always one of devolution. It's one of decay. It's one of rot. And so if you don't want to be a part of that, then at some point you have to put your foot down and say, no, that's bad. This is good. And this is what we're going to work toward. And that's what we need from men. We need men to be willing to do that, be willing to stand up, be willing to speak their minds. At the very least, be able to call out the things that are blatant, obvious lies and stop going along with them. Because if we don't do that, we're sunk. Because there's a crazy spirit in the world today that is just evil. It is outright evil, and it does not believe in life and flourishing. It just wants control, conformity, and perversion, generally speaking. And I don't want any part of that. That's evil in my book.
Guys, if you made it to the end of the show, I want to thank you personally, and I want to let you know that if you haven't seen last week's episode, we talk about the real reason why phones are so addictive. We're talking about if Hamza is quitting YouTube, and we asked the question, should men have women friends? So go ahead and click that link right there, and we'll see you next time on Man vs. World.
Actually, instead of clicking that, what we really want you to do is go into the description and watch the Manhood Mastery training, where I'm going to be teaching you 3 secrets to neuromasculine training, teaching how to train your brain in a way to unleash your optimum potential for a way that works with your male biology rather than against it. If you haven't checked this out, then you have to, because it's some of my best content out there. It can transform your life. It's completely free, only an hour long. I highly recommend you check it out. But otherwise, hope you enjoyed. Ooh, yop. See you all in the next one.